Welcome to Building Better Businesses, an ABA podcast. Learn firsthand from business owners who built successful ABA businesses. Utilize proven techniques and strategies to help your practice thrive. This is Building Better Businesses, an ABA podcast with Jonathan Mueller.
My name is Jonathan Mueller. I'm the host of Building Better Businesses, an ABA podcast, and I am tickled pink to welcome Tanya Scott to the podcast today. Tanya is an 18-year BCBA and experienced entrepreneur. She was the founder of Juvo Autism and Behavioral Health Services, and she is now the co-founder of Summa Academy and Nest Solutions. Tanya, welcome to the pod.
Thanks, Jonathan. I'm super excited to be here.
I am excited to have you. And I'm fascinated by your Juvo story. I mean, you grew Juvo from startup in 2006,
Yep.
which is like OG of the OG for ABA practices, to a multi-state team of like more than 500 team members. What was the hardest part about being an entrepreneur in our field that you didn't expect when you started Juvo?
Yeah. It always makes me just take first a collective big breath, like, whew, that happened. Hardest part. I think there's two main things I think of with regards to that. Starting in 2006, we started as a company that was serving school districts, and then slowly grew to serving families through state funding, through regional centers here in California. And then 2012 hit and we had to pivot to be healthcare. And I think that was really one of the biggest challenges, was really learning how to become a different industry, or join a different industry. And it was super exciting, but it was really, really hard. So I think that was primarily on the business side. I think the second thing for me was learning to not take things personally. It's such an intimate thing to be a business owner. And when you have partners, key team members, that your paths aren't really on the same course anymore and those things change, really learning that is a beautiful thing, right? That these kind of intersections happen, but then also need to not happen for everyone to grow as people. I think that was the other part that was hard, was really being able to fully not learn that, but embrace that. Like welcome people to go on that next path, even if it wasn't my path or our path as a team.
That idea of, it is intimate. I really like that term. I don't think I've ever heard that term in relation to entrepreneurship. And what I think about, my first entrepreneurial endeavor at Sierra Nevada Journeys, which was an outdoor education nonprofit in Reno, Lake Tahoe area. This is back in 2005, 2006. And it was a wonderful journey for 5-6 years. But I literally it was my friends who I were the first people I hired. Some of them were moving to Reno and they would live in our house for, a year plus. And over time, sometimes hard decisions had to be made that put that idea of friend and the organization's mission in conflict. And it was so hard to square those in my head. And I had to just keep coming back to, what is our mission, what we're trying to do? And that was my responsibility to have to live up to. But it's a super freaking hard thing, right?
Yeah, really hard. I think, when I look back, those were some of the toughest moments, were when those kind of breakups or, choosing your own adventures were happening, and just really being able to have some space to process that and really appreciate as humans that we have these paths that cross and then need to uncross, and that's super okay.
Yeah. Ooh, I like that. Paths that cross and sometimes need to uncross. It's so
Yep.
true. But Juvo itself, and I learned this, as I understand, is Latin for help, support, and serve.
Yeah.
And I think one thing that ABA business, any ABA practice owners struggle with is when mission focus comes into conflict with financial pressures, like we were just talking about.
Yeah.
Tell me about a time you had to navigate those conflicting priorities as owner and CEO of Juvo.
That's such a great question. And I think, many of us are reading all these various articles that are coming out now where this is a hot topic. I was super blessed to have lots of great investors along the road. And, I know we'll get into that more later as we grew and got to kind of that next level. And as we got closer to multi-state, we had brought on kind of a secondary round of investors in our kind of 2016 to 2021 window. And that round of investors decided that they wanted their money back. And so that actually is what had was the catalyst to us doing this last big acquisition where we were fully acquired. And I think that in itself was hard to not be the ones fully making the decision. That was just being in this scenario or relationship that kind of catapulted that was challenging. But through that process, this was just at the beginning of pandemic. All of a sudden, what we were looking at with regards to the types of folks that were acquiring us would have been, in my opinion, really not great for our team. We probably are,
Mm,
a lot of our team would have probably gotten cut. I think that was one of the hardest ones when, as a leadership team, we had to come together and say, what is so critical to us that we, in this basically shitty situation, how do we make the best of it? And for me, the best is how do we take care of our team? And we were luckily able to find something that best fit that. Um, and figure out a scenario where the majority of our team walking into this situation were wanted, were valued. And so that I think that was the biggest part was really having had some hard conversations with our other owners around no, this not this deal. This is not acceptable. This is not us doing our best. Even though we feel super defeated and want to just be done, we can do better. And I think that probably was the hardest one for me. I think the rest, I always had a team that we could have healthy debate and get through them. That one was, oof, gut punch.
oh my gosh. I mean, it's terrific that you had agency to then have a better outcome for your team. Tell me more about this. Tanya, what I'm fascinated with is like, I mean, when you're no longer the owner, right? You're not the one making all the decisions. Like, was that a phone call you got one day and it was just like, hey, we got to do something different? Is it something you see coming? And just how do those conversations happen?
Yeah, I think I definitely had some intuition around it coming just based off the types of meetings we were having, the types of conversations we were having, the urgency that was coming behind some, I think some of it is that we had projected really aggressive growth goals and weren't necessarily hitting those. And then you add pandemic on top of that. We as an agency weathered the pandemic amazingly well. I'm so proud of what our team accomplished through that. We had a lot of folks on our team that came from big healthcare, specifically hospital systems, and really took the approach that it is the family's decision if we're essential, because every family has a different scenario. We had families that have 4 kids on the spectrum that are now home all day. We're essential. And we had families that were like, no, this is, we can do okay. We can do, okay without this for a couple months. So that really allowed us to, again, put the needs of our clients first and communicate that through our team. I think having to weather that during this time where we did something really amazing. We had our best month ever the month before we were acquired is just really just a check and pill to swallow.
And
Yeah.
what month was this in the pandemic?
This was February or March of 21.
Oh, wow. So not even a
Mhm.
year in. You know what?
Yeah.
I mean, hell's yes. You know what I love about what you just described is like you gave families the choice,
Mhm.
right? And the same way as a business owner doesn't feel good if you don't have full agency. Like instead of going to the pandemic, say, okay, well, we're going to do this. Give families a choice. At the end of the day, it's all about the kiddos
Yeah.
and those
Yeah.
families we serve, right? That's powerful.
And again, it's a spectrum, right? It's not our decision to say, we're not going to serve you anymore. That's not why we got into this, right? If we're here truly thinking about the needs of the kids and the families. And then our second line was our team, right? So then the next level is if you want work, we have work for you. If and what we made some critical, hard finance decisions. One was the whole executive team, we cut our salaries in half. But our goal was that we were not laying anyone off and no one else was going to financially feel this burden because we were all going through something really hard. And we're talking about our team that, lives check to check. It was like these two things were happening simultaneously where we're like doing this amazing, amazing work to really um, serve the community in this hard time and take care of our team in this hard time. And yet behind the scenes, we're going through these conversations of like, but we're also about to get bought by by somebody and trying to figure out how to feel decent about that at the end of the day.
So at Ascend, we did the same thing. Like families, it was their choice. And I think we had something like 10, maybe 15% of families choose to pause, but it was their choice. And same thing with teams, right? Like we're going to give them their choice. Well, you know what I remember though, actually, as you described that, we had, I think, gosh, now my 7-year-old was 4-ish at the time. and was going through really bad separation anxiety, like going to a preschool and then ultimately to kindergarten. It was something we were really trying to work through. And then all of a sudden we were cut off from that after like a session. And we're like, no, wait, we need this. So, and we need it even more now, right? In this pandemic. And like, and we, it wasn't our choice. It was really hard for us. And I love that you put that choice out there for your families.
Yeah.
Let's stay on this topic for a moment around, I mean, you went through multiple rounds of fundraising you described until ultimately, the February 2021 sale, in which you sought outside investment. What would you want ABA owners to know about fundraising that you wish you knew?
Ooh, that's a good one. I love this part of our story, of our narrative as a Juvo family. Our first round of investors was in 2013, and I met this couple at a preschool cocktail party. My kids went to a hippie co-op preschool, and the parents loved to get together. And this family was invited because they were friends of one of the families. And I'm talking to the wife and telling her what I do, and she's like, "You need to meet my husband." And he's a part of a private equity group in San Francisco. And they had just completed a big deal. And there was a group of gentlemen that wanted to invest in a small local company here in the Bay Area. Now, I didn't know this at the time. We were just having this conversation, and she's like, "Oh, he's into home care, and there's lots of parallels." So we start talking. And at this point, we're a year into now being a healthcare company, and pretty much didn't know our ass from our elbow when it comes to like really understanding the nuances of healthcare. I mean, we did an amazing job of figuring it out, but lots of wheel creating that didn't really probably need to be done. And so we start meeting with this gentleman kind of as a consultant over the course of a couple months. And after probably the third or fourth month, he's like, we want to invest in your company. And we weren't even looking for investors at the time, but we were definitely looking for support and resources and a little relief. I mean, we had hit the 6-year mark. We, still had those occasional times where we're helping to fund payroll because cash flow is delayed. The same things that I think every one of us has gone through at some point in time. And if you haven't yet, you probably will. So listen up. Um, and really we were just tired. We were kind of exhausted. Both my partner and I then were both moms. We both had our children. I had 2 kids before, one during Juvo. She had both of hers during Juvo. Um, so we were like, well, this is super interesting. What does this mean? So, so I'm kind of giving a long story, but I'll get to the meat of, what to know about fundraising. Um, that was so organic that it was a beautiful partnership. And they brought a CEO to our team who had come from home care. Everyone lived within 15 miles of each other. Really, they truly believed in our mission and our values. It was very aligned, and it was a beautiful ride. And we went all the way to 2016. They just kind of hit a point where they felt like they had done what they wanted to do, which is why we went to market again. I learned later that they wish they hadn't. And recently we're like, "Do you guys want to start a new ABA company?" And I was like, "Not insurance funded. I don't." And that was great, but I've been there, done that. But I think part of it is what I learned was a long dating period. Like it's a marriage. Like you are marrying someone and you might not know all the good or bad, just like they might not know all the good or bad of what's going on within your company. But the longer that you can actually date, and you need to get to know them just as much as they need to get to know you, everything in that kind of courting process and the due diligence process is got to be feel 50-50. I think as owners, we sometimes either have this imposter syndrome, or we feel like the little girl in the room. It's very much a male dominated scene on the kind of investor at private equity side. So really being clear on why you're doing it, what you want out of it. And if you're going to stay, you got to make sure that they are aligned with your values, and that there's like clear conversations up front about when something is a disagreement, how are you going to work it out? Um, and then my other piece of advice I learned over the year was in contracts. These are folks that are very well versed, have lots of experience in these very extensive legal contracts. And my theory was always, I want what you want. So if you have it for you, I want it for me. And that really helped me in the moments and clauses where we didn't have that. I could then have a conversation. Tell me why. Why do you get something that I don't get when it comes to like a protection or a clause in a contract? Or so that kind of became my like negotiation strategy around everything. If you have it, then I want it. Because otherwise, maybe it's not that great. Maybe you don't really need it anymore then. That helped me in the sense of I'm not going to go learn and, become a contract lawyer overnight. But that kind of gave me this place of like, again, a value to come from, to give me a bit of confidence in those meetings where I was like, I don't know a single word people just said in this contract.
Sorry, what the hell is force majeure mean? For like that idea of symmetry is really powerful, right? In most contract negotiations, as easy as to get lost in the jargon, it comes down to, are you aligned on what you're hoping to achieve?
Yeah,
And so that symmetry just seems natural. But is there a specific instance of like something maybe you asked for because you saw it in there, but you didn't see it for you?
I have to think about that. I feel like I used it so much, I can't even remember. That was like my answer to everything. It's a very comfortable way to respond to things. I'd have to think a little more about a specific. I think that part of it for me was like the word partnership. So when we were sold in 2016, we had probably met with 18 different investor buyers and had 9 offers. So it
Oh
was
my
like
gosh.
it was a like I love learning about the way that new kind of things work. So I was fascinated. I mean, it was super interesting. We worked with the BRAF group, which was fantastic. The amount that we had to learn about the nuances across 9 LOIs was like, I'm like, I need a spreadsheet. And I needed to like have things in buckets. There aren't apples to apples. It's like apples to zebras to Ford trucks. So, I mean, we had a great team, especially that the current investors then were critical as part of like my learning process through that. I would just say if you want investors, if you could go into it when you're not desperate and you have the time to take it slow and really just make sure it feels good, because they're going to use the word partnership a lot, and call them to the table. Is this really a partnership? When is it not going to be a partnership? What are those things where you're going to make a call? I think the biggest thing is there comes a point where people will buy a majority of your company and you are no longer the primary owner. So there is going to come a time where there may be calls that they override you, and you've got to find a place that you can live with that or not live with that, and know that maybe you want to do something different.
I mean, I can just thinking you had was it 18 meetings, 9 different buyers. This is like 9 different suitors, right? Who I'm sure were doing everything they could to woo you. And then to your point, like you fall back on the whatever relationship you build with them and getting to understand their values and them as people and what they're trying to accomplish and on the contracts that you sign. And that's going to be the future going forward. But was this like literally like your night job in addition? I mean, you're still running an organization, right?
It was a lot. At that point in time, we had the CEO, and then my partner and I were both there. So between the 3 of us, we were able to make the space to do it well. And again, we had our other investor that was outside. He was very hands-on. He was more like an advisor, and he was very involved in the process. So shared between, I would say, 4 of us. And then again, working with the BRAF group it's not a BRAF plug. It's not a commercial. I'm not getting
Yeah,
paid.
right. There's no sponsorship of the BAF group on this group, but yes, the role of an advisor can be critical, right? Because they've been there, done that, they've seen
Yeah,
that.
because they'd help organize these things like conversations and offers, and then kind of help talk through them. They would be the ones sometimes going back and having some of these negotiation conversations, or, just telling people flat out, like, you're not even in the running, let's drop you out. So I would say that as a team, we were able to really work well and do it without, because it is, I mean, if you are a single owner operator trying to go down this path, it is a full-time job. Like, you've got to make sure you have some space in whatever you've got going on. If you're saying, I don't have room to take a 2-hour meeting once a week for your team, you don't have the space to start down the M&A process.
Right. Yeah, for
Yeah.
sure. Right. Tanya, one of the things I've appreciated about you since we met, I think we first met at the CASP conference. Part of your passions are around sort of business, operations, strategy, though you've been a BCBA for so many years. Um, and not every BCBA nor owner operator necessarily likes that stuff, right? So, what does the word strategy mean to you as an ABA owner operator, and why is it so important for ABA practices to have a strategy?
Yeah. I love strat. It's interesting because my youngest is 14, and he is slightly obsessed with watching gambling on YouTube, which is kind of terrible as a parent to like know that about your kid. But I was like, let's talk about game theory. So we started getting in these other, and I'm like, oh, because your brain works like my brain, where you like to understand how things work and how do you make them better, or how do you, not trick the system, but I don't really accept no. I accept I need to find another way to do it. Like, that's always kind of been who I am. That's kind of my nature. But For me, strategy was this overlaying of our values with our culture with sustainability. And when I say sustainability, I mean financially, like no money, no mission. And that took a while for me as a leader to get to that place of understanding how critical the overlap of those things are, the synchronicity of those things. Our initial company was very educational, social worky. And so there was a little bit of this, oh, you just brought the man in, when we had investors, when we were growing. And so really getting the team to understand no money, no mission, that is why we're focused on some of these metrics. And here's how it's going to result. And so the strategy piece for me was, how do you keep all three of those things healthy? Your values, your culture, and your sustainability of your company. And it changes constantly. So you have to keep, it's like a dashboard. You have to keep looking at all three of your meters and go, okay, this one's getting a little hot. I gotta, what am I gonna do to help that? If I'm working on the sustainability one, how am I communicating that to my team so that it doesn't impact my culture? And am I making sure that the decision I made is aligned with our values? It's literally like you're juggling these three balls, but it's super fun. I mean, it's fun when it works. It's not fun when it doesn't work.
Yeah. I love your definition and, strategy at its heart to me is just, how you, I'm gonna use this term compete, though I've always said I think competition's for losers, especially in our field, but like how you uniquely differentiate yourself from others, right? And strategy can be applied to any organization, right? It doesn't have to be ABA or healthcare.
Yeah.
And it's sort of the old model I always saw of strategy was like, hey, come up with a 5-year strategic plan and then let's go execute against that come heck or high water. And it's like, no, like to your point, strategy has to be adaptable. I mean, you're not trying to change your mission, right? Or what you do like every month, but you have to react to your environment. Oh, by the way, like that's our field, right? You have to react to your environment and things that change um, in order to continually refine your strategy. And as you described, like optimize for your team, for your mission, for sustainability.
And how do you quantify those things? Like I am still a behavior analyst and I love data around it. So we would figure out ways to quantify, is our culture strong? Are we aligned to our values? And luckily the folks that were always investing in us were also a bit of data heads. And so, looking at some of those business metrics and establishing what our KPIs are above and beyond just some financial numbers, looking at scorecards for our team that had metrics in them that was maybe about billable hours, but also about parent satisfaction surveys and number of kids graduating and these other measurements that would speak to our values of quality service. Yeah, I think a strategy kind of like sailing, and I'm not a sailor. I don't know why I say this, but it just came to me where there's like you have the values of, why do you sail? Like, are you doing it because you enjoy it, you want to be on the water, or because you want to race? Right? Those are two very different reasons to sail. The culture part is like, how fast do we want to go and how risky do we want to be? Like, is everyone on the boat comfortable with this boat being fully sideways? And I'm sure
Mhm.
there's a sailing term for that, but I don't know what it is. And then sustainability for me is like, for how long, right? Is this just a 2-hour trip? Is this the Gilligan's Island? Are we just going around, or like we're doing a trip around the world? Because again, those are two very different fields. And all three of those things need to pivot based off of the answers to those three questions.
Yeah. It's a great point that you've got to bring your team along with it too. It's
Mhm.
not just sort of like emerge from, this darkened room and be like, team, we've got a strategy. It's like arrived on high. No, like bring your team along with it, get their feedback. And oh my gosh. So I don't think I've ever told this story before. So I was in college in 4th year, University of Virginia. I'd gotten a job offer from a management consulting firm, AT Carty in Chicago. And this was like, I don't know, February 1998, and I thought I was hot shit. And especially because there was this dude that came. I don't know if he's a partner or what he was, but he came and he visited me and he was like, and we sat down. This is after the offer, and like he was answering all my questions and trying to recruit me. So anyway, so I thought I was like the greatest thing since sliced bread. So here's what the group that I was going to join was called the Strategy and Economic Practice. And they did economic consulting, litigation, and a lot of strategy work. I was telling him how like, yeah, I love strategy because it's like, this sexy stuff and and I somehow made a comment like, oh yeah, data isn't really, data is different. And he's like, whoa, whoa, hold on, Jonathan. Strategy only happens through data. And that's why. the economics practice at Cardi was the one who like also specialized in strategy. You cannot separate the two, just as you were describing, right? This idea of like having KPIs and dashboards and you're looking at data all the time is critical to influencing your strategy, right? Yeah, I'd be curious, what was an intractable problem maybe that you had at Juvo that you were able to solve using your business and operations and strategy expertise?
It's got to be the pandemic. I mean, I think that was the biggest one for us where we really had to sit down and have some hard conversations about these three specific areas about our values, our culture, and our team, and what is sustainable, and make some hard choices. And I think because of the communication of our leadership team at that point in time, we did a really good job. I mean, we did, in like October of 2020 or November, we laid off three people, three administrative people. We actually ended up retaining two of them that moved into clinical positions. And then we were able to bring them back. But like that was probably the hardest. But I do think that this perspective of strategy of it couldn't be just a financial decision and it couldn't be just a values decision. We had to equally weigh all three. And then, I mean, we did town hall after town hall after town hall with our team to
Mm.
just make sure that we were accessible to them to talk through and hear their questions. During the same times, the whole murder of George Floyd happened and Black Lives Matter. And there was a curfew put in place in Oakland because there were riots happening. And we had staff saying, I'm scheduled to work past curfew and I'm not comfortable. And so we had to really look at our values and go, all right, we're changing. Like we care more about the safety of our team than these additional 2 hours a day. And we're going to change it for now and sit down and really have those honest conversations and continue to balance those three things. But it was, one would push the front and then we'd have to adjust the other two. And then one would put, so it's like this, it's like you're on a seesaw, but yet there's three legs, which
Mm.
makes it a little harder to seesaw on.
I'm mentally trying to picture that seesaw. No, you're exactly right. Like you have to balance these three things. Is there like a book or a resource on strategy that was like really instrumental to you or that you'd encourage that
Mm,
every ABA practice owner read?
That's a great question. The one that I love the most, and through my consulting stuff with Nets now, I always recommend the E-Myth because all start out as technicians and then, or we all start out as the one that makes the bread and we love bread. So we're going to start a business selling bread. And there are these levels that you have to graduate or mature to not A, lose your mind, and B, to be a good leader and serve your team in the way that they need to be served. And you can't still always make bread. So that E-Myth is like the one that I go to regularly. I reread sometimes, and I've definitely recommended that to other business owners. And the ones that read it are like, oh, I get it.
Yes. Because and the E Myth, I love the book because it really dispels this myth that we're like a nation of entrepreneurs. No, absolutely not. We are a nation of bread makers, of hairdressers. We're quote unquote, as the book would call it, you referenced technicians. That's what we know really well. We weren't born in, certainly like who gets taught like entrepreneurship, right? And so it's a different, this very meta, self reflective way, I think, of thinking about our roles as owners. Oh, it's powerful.
Yeah. And then when you think about people that you might have in that managerial level position that were phenomenal clinicians, that doesn't mean that they generalize automatically how to be a wonderful manager. Doesn't mean we can't get them there, right? But then our work becomes the training and mentorship of of those leadership skills, of those managerial skills. It's not, the programs are great, their assessments are great, the families love them, but then you give them 12 RBTs to manage and some different things come up.
Absolutely, or try promoting them into, a clinical director role when they've been an awesome, clinician and deliverer of service. I mean, it's one of the biggest, I think, disservices we do. And this is much broader than ABA, right? Look at software engineers, right? This happens everywhere in the workforce is you're a great software engineer. I'm going to promote you to being a manager. Guess what? Totally different skill sets.
But then the juxtaposition to that is with all this private equity money in the ABA, companies are hiring these huge experts that are coming in from these different fields that don't know ABA. And I've seen just as many challenges or catastrophes sometimes. Instead of promoting someone and giving them a little increase and supporting them and mentoring, we're going to bring in some bigwig. We went through that a little bit and had to learn, how to find that balance between where do we need a high level expert in a certain area and where do we want to invest in our people and give them the skills they need so that they can, move up as they want to, as it feeds them.
Absolutely. My personal philosophy on this is that if it all else equal, if you can promote someone from within versus bringing in an outsider, like that is the right thing to do every day of the week and twice on Thursdays. But it's so easy, right? To sort of be wooed by, oh, there's this other outsider who has all this expertise in a resume. And they don't succumb to sometimes you might have to do that, right? But whenever possible, give your teams an opportunity as long as you are investing in them and coaching and mentoring and training them to be successful in that next role, not set them up to fail, right?
Absolutely. Otherwise, you just piss people off and then they leave.
Exactly. I'm gonna spin this record backwards because you mentioned game theory, and I'm gonna share it. I need to tell. So I'm an Asian studies economics major going way back, and game theory is a very niche thing. It's become more commonplace last couple of decades. It's looking at the world as a game, and when you do research, it's and like putting different subjects in and having them play a game to see what a real world or what the game's outcome would be, and then that outcome simulates what's in the real world. And I know this only because in my fourth year at UVA, I would say after I get paid like $10 for like 3 hours of being a research like lab rat in my game theory class. I was like, $10, I'll have a large pizza and I'll do whatever. But like these games are like, it's super powerful as a way to illustrate the rest of life. But how did you like get to know about game theory?
I don't know much about it. I just know that it exists. And, I'm a behavior analyst. So with my son, I'm like, what's a replacement behavior? And trying to find a way to channel this urge or desire he has to learn strategy. He's very competitive. So he plays pretty competitive basketball. But he's always
Mhm.
about the play and the like how things work. So I don't even remember how I came across just hearing that game theory was a thing. So we started researching it together. So I actually didn't go into it knowing much. I just went into it knowing maybe I could pivot him a little bit from watching blackjack games to learn because he's really sharp on that stuff, and so figuring out a way to he loved playing video games, and I'm like learning how to make a game is more powerful to you than only knowing how to play a game, right? So and then he the summer of the pandemic he actually built his own PC because I was like, if you're going to play X number of hours a day, then you need to have some investment in how things work. And I think that's and once he gets into it, he really does enjoy that.
Oh, that creating a game means you understand the rules of the game, the inputs
Yep.
that influence it. You determine the outputs. And what
Yep.
better way to understand strategy?
I think a part of what I've loved about being an entrepreneur, which is not what I set out to do at any point in time, is the opportunity that it creates. It's allowed me with my family and my 3 kids and a husband and my parents who were working class, so were his parents, start to create different opportunities for my family and for my children. And that's what I want for my kids. And we have these
Yeah.
conversations where, my son now, I'm not going to college if I make $1 million playing video games. Well, I mean, let's have that conversation, but how do you keep setting yourself up to have as many doors open to you as you can? And that's what entrepreneurship does. It does allow you freedom. However, once you're in it, it is a lot. I mean, you're carrying the livelihood of 500 plus people. Like your decisions impact them. There's a lot of doors in front of you, but what you're carrying to each door is really heavy sometimes. So I think like you can't be risk averse and be an entrepreneur and grow to some substantial size. I think you can, but you've got to know that about yourself and be like, cool, I'm gonna stay. Our initial plan when we started Jugo, which was called Ed Supports, was to have 5 clinicians and one admin that could unjam our printer that kept jamming. That was like our goal. One admin and 5 clinicians, and we would just like, and that would have been a sweet place to just hang out for a long time, but that's not how it went.
You're exactly. There has to be some level of tolerance for adversity and risk because you're not going to be fully in control of the environment when it throws at you, but you can be more in control of how you respond to that, right? I'm trying to remember back with game theory, and I think the classic game is Prisoner's Dilemma. I don't know if you're familiar with this, but the idea of like two members of a criminal gang are arrested and imprisoned, and each prisoner is in solitary confinement, right? And the police don't have enough evidence to convict them both, but they plan to sentence them both to 1 year in prison. But then they approach each of them in solitary confinement with like this Faustian, this bargain. I think it goes something like there's 4 different possible outcomes. If like prisoner A and prisoner B betray each other, they each serve 2 years in prison. And if prisoner A betrays B, but B is silent, A is set free. Woo, cool. But B serves 3 years in prison and vice versa. And then if they both remain silent, they'll both serve 1 year in prison. And so, like, as you put people through that game, it is extraordinary to see how to, I mean, betray is I think what they call it the dominant strategy. But that's an example of like how play this game and play out. And the game tends to mimic then what happens in the real world. It's really powerful.
Yeah. And then how do your values fit into that, right?
Right, right, right. Hey, just because this is an optimal outcome in terms of going to jail or not, but is that an optimal outcome to what my values are? Exactly. I Tell me about, in life post Juvo, you've started a couple organizations and Nest Solutions and Summa Academy. Tell me more.
Yeah, I've embraced the title of serial entrepreneur. Just can't seem to stop. So actually, right when we were being acquired in 2021, I've always wanted a school. My background and introduction to ABA is through the world of special education. So I love that. And Juvo's always worked with public school districts in the Bay Area. And so I had the opportunity to actually open a school in spring. Well, the facility started in spring of 2021. We opened in September of 2021. And our schools for kids with special needs, it's here in Pleasanton, California. And we serve kids that the districts have tried to serve, but are just unable to meet their needs, usually because of significant behaviors um, and just multiple kind of complex needs going on. And I'm right back where I started. That I started working in a school like this. They're called non-public schools. I literally started in 1999 at Spectrum in Oakland. And that was my introduction to special ed and ABA. And I'm like right back there, being able to have an environment like that, to have these new folks come as a team and serve these phenomenal kids. So that's Summa Academy. And we also work with the school districts. They contract us to bring our trained staff into the schools to, again, serve the students that they have a little more challenge meeting their needs. That's Summa. And then in the spring, I launched Nest Solutions. Nest is NESTT, and I'm going to be transparency here of being cheesy. It's the acronym for my family. So my kids are Nella, Isai, Suhaila, and then my husband's Torrance, and I'm Tanya. So that is where Nest came from. It's been in the family. My husband has a studio. It's called Nest Studio. So like it's always been kind of a thing for us. I'm getting to consult with other ABA owner operators, just on kind of where they are in their journey and where they're headed. I also work with some companies that are not in ABA. I've worked with a company of 2 owners who are midwives, which is phenomenal because their products, they always say, my product is catching babies. And just to be able to translate and generalize some of this outside of ABA, I'm engaging with a juice company here. And anyway, so that's what Nets does. And it's a blast. I'm like really loving it.
That's really cool that you've chosen to share your expertise and wisdom
Thank you.
with others. Um, well, tell me, Tanya, what's one thing that every ABA business owner should start doing and one thing to stop doing?
Oh, goodness. I think they should start by really looking outside of ABA. We is even if for those of us that have been in this for a while, as a field, we're in our infancy. So we don't have all the answers and we don't need to recreate the wheels. Go outside of ABA and find organizations that support, similar types of businesses. We joined a company or an organization in Oakland called Inner City Advisors that basically, if you hit a certain revenue mark, you could apply to be a portfolio company. They gave you all
Mm,
this pro bono support. That's how we initially got our first banking situation. So find resources for small businesses in your community. You will create a community of other entrepreneurs outside of ABA that you will learn an insane amount from. So I think
mm.
that's the first thing is like, go bigger, go out, open the door, go outside of ABA. And you will learn a lot.
Oh, powerful. How about stop doing?
Oh, I would say try to stop making desperate decisions. And by desperate decisions, I mean hiring someone that your gut tells you is not a good fit because you need someone, or accepting an authorization or rates with an insurance company, even though that doesn't fit within your model or within your budget. We are the experts at what we do. So it's almost contradictory to the start. The stop is also stand in your clinical expertise and be willing to really value what you provide and stand up for that when it comes to negotiating rates, or again, getting pushback on what if you know a kid really needs something and this insurance company is pushing back and saying no, use the practice guidelines. there are these tools out there to help us. Use them, reach out. There's so many resources to help with denials, but we've got to start really standing in confidence when we're having these conversations. Otherwise, it will be dictated to us and not by our fields. And we're approaching some of that. So this is the time to, and there's a nice way to do it. I mean, we always were in partnership with our insurance companies that funded us. But there's also a time to say, I'm sorry, that's not right. That does not work for what this child needs, this family needs, my business, my team. And that's okay. There's so much out there that being able to say no is one of the best tools that you can do. So I guess it's stop saying yes. I think that's everything.
Oh, rock on. Well, Tanya, where can people find you online?
So I'm on mostly Instagram. It's Summa_Academy and then nest.solutions. Again, Nest is with 2 T's. And then nestsolutions.com. It's my website for that.
Awesome. I'll make sure to drop those in the show notes. Well, are you ready for the hot take questions?
I'm ready.
All right, let's do it. Tanya, you're on your deathbed. What's the one thing you want to be remembered for?
Inclusive connections.
Beautifully said. What's your most important self-care practice?
Sleep. One is totally sleep. I feel like I have endless days, but the sleep just gives me what I need to start that next one the next day. I'm an avid sleeper.
Absolutely. What's your favorite song?
My favorite song is Orange Moon by Erykah Badu.
Ooh, I have not heard it. I'm going to go listen. If you give your 18-year-old self one piece of advice, what would it be?
It's not that big a deal. I mean, just across the board. Like, I think that's it's not that big a deal. And lead with kindness. If you, even in those hard moments, or if you lead with kindness, it all works out. And not always how you thought. Mostly not how you thought, but that's okay.
Right. Not always how you thought, but generally getting better. Yeah. As long as you're learning from it, right? Well, if you only wear one style of footwear, what would it be?
My bright blue Birkenstock flip-flops. They're so cool. I used to wear them with wool socks. I went to school in New York City. So in the winter, I'd wear them with wool socks. Not in California anymore, but yeah. And the fact that they're back, and I bought a pair during the pandemic, and if I could live my life and schedule my lifestyle to wear them every day, I absolutely would. I don't mind the heel here or there to get a little sassy, but the flip-flop is my go-to.
Oh, you were a hipster decades before the hipsters ever took over. Tanya, this was so much fun. Thank you.
It was. Thanks so much, Jonathan.
Thanks for listening to Building Better Businesses in ABA podcast. Stay tuned for our next exciting episode. In the meantime, please like, subscribe, share, and comment. We value your feedback. Don't forget to follow us on social media at elementrcm.ai.